Hey, good morning, and welcome to Everyday Talk 24/7. It's December 4th, the fourth day of the 25 days of Christmas. So great to have you along this morning, and we do this special Lord's Day edition of Everyday Talk 24/7. As I mentioned, starting this series, one of the things we're going to cover in this time is the New Testament gives us at least 8 word pictures of the wonderful person of Christ. Intimate detail written by the Holy Spirit give us an idea, beautiful word pictures of what Jesus was all about, what his love for us was all about. And one of those pictures is a vulnerable baby. Jesus came to earth fully human as a vulnerable baby. He was totally dependent upon his parents. On the one hand, we know that God's plan was for Christ to live his life in a certain way and die at a certain time and rise again at a certain time. But that's no different for the plan that each of us have. Jesus was vulnerable to God, just as you and I are vulnerable to God. Jesus was vulnerable to the authorities placed over him, the human authorities, just as you and I are. That's significant. Because as a baby, he knew discomfort, he knew pain, he knew upset, he knew what it meant to have to be cleaned and to have other people care for him and to feed him. He was totally dependent in that human sense, under God's sovereign plan, just like the rest of us, but we can't diminish the fact that he was totally vulnerable. That gives us great hope. Look at what the writer of Hebrews says. We do not have a high priest. We're going to combine a couple of images together here, but this is mainly the one of the vulnerable child, vulnerable baby. We don't have a high priest who was unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are, yet was without sin, and this allows us to go boldly before the throne of grace. That means it's starting from the very earliest time, from our newborns, on up through the time when we actually go to be with God. Jesus is able to sympathize with us because he experienced the things that we experience in terms of temptation and the possibility of temptation. He knew pain. He knew hurt. It's like I said, he was vulnerable to other people. This is something that we need to be encouraging our children with, even our infants. I have no idea when God's going to save them. That's up to God. But I can tell them that Jesus knew what it was like to have a messy diaper. Jesus knew what it was like to be hungry. Jesus knew what it was like to have an upset stomach or to be hurt, to be injured. He knew what that was like. And he understands the difficulty, the hurt, the hardship that our children have. So we can even pray with our infants when they're unhappy, when they're hurting. We can tell them that Jesus went through this for them. Again, I don't know what God is going to do in terms of saving them, but I know that that's true about God, Jesus, experiencing them. The incarnation of Christ, which is what we've been talking about here. Jesus God, the plan of God, thought it necessary for Jesus to experience all the messiness of being an infant, all the hardships, all the vulnerability, all the truth of not being understood by parents, of even not being able to communicate in human form, something that was challenging for him, and to say how he was hurting and when and where and all of that. And as a vulnerable child, Jesus went through that. As a vulnerable baby, he went through that. And you can tell your children about that. And you can tell them about that all the rest of their life. Isn't that amazing? His vulnerability is something that we can always understand and talk about. And Jesus understands. He sympathizes. But he didn't cave. He didn't sin. So you can know pain, you can know discomfort, you can know being treated wrongly, or you can know being misunderstood, and all those things. And Jesus was there. So when you look at little children, look at infants, have a picture in your mind of something that can be built for us an entire lifetime of Jesus being vulnerable as a baby so that he could sympathize, understand, and plead for us in prayer before God, knowing exactly what it is that we're facing. What a beautiful gift. The vulnerability of Jesus as a baby. Mind-blowing. But that's the type of God we have. That's what we're celebrating with the incarnation. God made flesh here amongst us. Such a comforting truth. As Psalm 78 says, let's not hide this wonder from our children. Let's talk to them about it. Let's rejoice in it. Let that be a theme of the incarnation for you. Through Christ's vulnerability, he understands our vulnerability and gives us hope. What a great, wonderful blessing of God, the vulnerability of the baby Jesus. And that's the thought for this day 4 of the 25 days of Christmas. And Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow. You have a great day.